welcome to part 4 of A Little Birdie Told Me. We've gotten some more birds flying in. Here is a look at what people have gotten done this week. Thanks so much for sharing these photos, you guys. It's so great to see your progress, and it's wonderful that we can inspire each other, and I love all the different variations of birds that are coming in so far. So keep them coming. Can't wait to see more. So in this lesson, we are going to be working with glue turned applique. So you'll need a fusible product that will stay in the applique. Applique has one, Alex Anderson has one. If you're used to freezer paper, or if you don't have that product and you want to do a different kind of turned applique, go back to a video that I did previously. I think it's called just turned applique. And I do go through a freezer paper method in there where all you need is freezer paper and starch, and you can turn the edges just as well, so you don't have to run out and get the product that we'll be using for this video. So go ahead and download and cut out the rest of your templates, except that little tulip drawing. Save that for later. That'll be for the embroidery. But grab those and we will start with perfect circles. So making perfect circles is actually pretty simple to do. Karen K. Buckley has a product called Perfect Circles, and they're these Myhre templates that you can use over and over again, and they take heat really well. It comes in lots of different sizes, and there's 4 of each size, so it's great because you can do 4 of these all at once. But basically what you're going to do, oh, and if you don't have these, you can cut a piece of, cut a 1-inch circle out of a piece of cardboard. A couple layers of freezer paper will work really well too. That's fine. Just something that won't cave in when you pull against it. So whatever your template material is, you just put it on the back of your fabric. Take a fabric marking pen. This is a Frixion pen. You could take chalk, a blue line, whatever. Mark the circle, and you can do this. We're going to need 8 of these 1-inch circles, so you can put them on your fabric and trace the lines. Just remember that we're going to be cutting 1/4 of an inch around the circle, so if you're going to mark a bunch at once, make sure that they're 1/2 of an inch apart right here. Otherwise they're going to get too close and you won't have that 1/4 inch, because we're going to stitch into that. Once you have your circles all marked and cut out, all you're going to do is take a threaded needle, just with sewing thread, doesn't matter what color at all, because we are going to be hiding that thread, and just do a little running stitch 1/8 inch away from the line. Take 3 stitches at once. So once you get all the way around the circle, what I like to do is just overlap it just a little bit, maybe a stitch or 2, and then exit out the front side. Just a little bit easier to gather when it's on the outside. Okay, and then just place your template right up against the drawing, the outline, and gather that in place. And it just pulls really nicely. Once it's gathered, I do like to take a few stitches in the gathers just to hold the end in place, because this you'll be clipping off here in a bit. So okay, and then what you'll be doing is turning it around, placing it on your ironing surface, your pressing surface, and you can just kind of take your fingernail and run it to get the points out. Okay, and then when you clip the tails, make sure that you have a long enough one so that you can keep gathering it while you starch and press it down, because if it comes kind of loose, you're going to want to have that to do. This one got a little short, but I'll manage. Just a little shot of starch on each one of those, and here you can use a big iron too, and just set it right on top and just set it there for a little while. And again, you can scratch out, even after you iron it, you can scratch out those little, and you can manage those too when you go to sew them in. You can kind of hear it sizzle. Alright, and then once you've got those done, basically, I'll do the other 2, but you want to open it up, find where your thread is, and just slip your nail underneath there. Just grab whatever template you're using out of there, and then you can take and just pull that a little bit tighter and get it back into its circle formation. And then you've got these perfect little applique pieces that we'll be stitching on here pretty quick. Okay, so let's start with the template that is going to be the base of the oya. This is the size of the fabric piece, and you can see the little oyas will Fit pretty nicely right inside there. If you're going to be using the fusible web, this will stay in the applique, remember. If you're using freezer paper, the freezer paper comes out. When I trace the template onto the fusible web, I always like to do it with the fusible side up because then I don't have to think about reversing anything. So you can put these as close together as you want to. You're going to be tracing them with a pencil, some chalk, a Frixion pen, something that won't show through an applique. Don't use a Micron or a Sharpie because the ink will bleed through the fabric when you use starch. Or excuse me, when you use the glue. So anyway, so trace 12 of these out. And then once you have 12 of them cut out, you can place them on your fabric, shiny side down, wrong side of the fabric up, and make sure that you're fusing these to the back of the fabric. All right, and then sort of place them so that it looks, you know, where if you've got a pattern like I do on this one, place them so that you can get sort of close. I'm not fussy, I'm sort of fussy cutting, but nothing really crazy. Watch your distance in here, no more than 1/2 of an inch. So in this case, it's going to work out, but it's really close. So same here. Okay, so then once you've got them lined up where you want them on your fabric, you just take a little iron and just lightly press. Oh gosh, 5 seconds really is all it usually takes here. Careful here, this one got a little close, so I want to make sure I have a double seam allowance between all of these shapes, remember. Once you have your fusibles pressed on there, you're going to go ahead and just cut around each shape with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So make sure you're not cutting right on that line because we're going to come back and fold those up. So 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If they start to peel off a little bit, no problem, just tap it again with the iron, and then we will turn those edges with glue. This method of applique, if you haven't seen it before, it allows you to turn the edges before you go to stitch them on the background. So in needle turn applique, you would have a piece that looked just like this, and then you would turn it as you stitch it. And here we're basically going to turn the edges before we ever get to the stitching. So before we turn them, we want to make sure that we know where all the convex and the concave curves are and sort of our trouble areas. There's a little bit of a curve here. Anytime you have a concave, I always think of it as a cave that you would enter into, because I get those two mixed up, is you just want to clip real close up to the edge in just a few places so that it turns really easy. And incidentally, the tools that I'm using, these are from Applique. These are really great turning tools. If you don't have these, you can use a hair marker, a cuticle stick. It doesn't really matter. You just need to have the tools to turn the edges under. So what you want to do is when you're turning a shape like this, start on the steepest part of the curve. And whatever tool you're using here, most people will probably have this, is you want to press the steepest part of the curve first, and you want to stay really close to that edge with your stick as you're turning. And that way you can gather the edges in. This straight line's pretty simple. Okay, we'll go straight to the middle. Press that all down a little bit just so it stays. And then if you get a little tuck in there, of course you can just kind of work it out. Then on this side, same thing. See that? So my stick is really close to the edge. I'm not up at the edge trying to gather the fabric. I'm gathering right at the edge. And that will let the gathers automatically work into that curve. Working our way down one side, just put glue on the one. And this slope is pretty easy, this curve, so we can just follow it along with what we've done already. So we've got that nice little angle in there. Here we've got another place where we're going to need to gather. So see, I'm working really close. You just kind of press it down with your finger. And so what you've noticed is on the one side where we've got this really steep point, I have folded that all the way down. So I'll show you how to address that. is just fold that up. So it pleats onto itself. Another steep curve right in here, staying close to the edge of the applique, the fusible. Now if this little edge should stick out, all you're going to do is accordion pleat it on itself. Like that. And remember, when you're using that product, that fused wash away applique product, it stays in the applique. So here you have the piece that you're going to be able to sew this onto, and then we'll put this onto the piece. And we'll come back and do that in just a little bit. Okay, so now we have the 8 perfect circles and the 12 Oya background applique. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the left and right sort of floral tulip shapes that go on either side of the Oya. Okay, so we're going to cut 4 L shapes, 4 right shapes out of the applique or whatever fusible stay-in applique product that you have, or freezer paper, and cut them right out on the line. And then when you line them up on your fabric, make sure that the shiny side is facing down, the fabric is right side up, and then you're going to press the shapes onto the back, and then cut 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we'll come back and turn those edges because we've got some deeper points in here. Okay, so you should have your 4 left and right pieces, and we'll go ahead and turn one of these so you can see what to do on these crazy points. And there's quite an aggressive curve on this one. Alright, so in the curve, in the deepest part, go as far in as you can without touching the edge of that. And I'd say give it maybe 3 clips on either side. And then here there's a little bit of a curve. It might be a good idea just to clip a couple places. And then we've got this significant point here. Sometimes I'll just cut that little tip right off so it's straight when it's real pointy. Okay, so put your dab of glue on the edge of the template material, the fusible material, and just start, remember, pushing the fabric really close to the edge of the fusible. And it should lay right against there pretty easily. And you see when we clip that fabric how it wants to spread in that concave curve. Now the convex curve, of course, we don't have to clip that. We just have to focus on the gathering. And again, same thing. Just stay really close. Probably can see this one a little bit better because it's darker against this light background. And then once I've got it pressed, I'll just give a really good solid press with my finger. And once you've got the curve, you can just go ahead and press it on down. Pop in more glue if there's a little spot like that guy that's popping up. Okay, and up here we've got quite a little point. Goes to about right there. So on a really significant point like that, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just fold that down, and then when this comes over, I don't have to worry so much about raw edges here. So you could do that. Some people don't. I just find it's a little neater. So I just kind of fold that one little tip of fabric under like that. Press it on down. And then since you're going to be folding along this curve, we want to put some glue on the fabric there too. All the way along your edge there. You can glue that tip down. And then just start in that concave curve. You see you've got a little flag of fabric hanging over. That's okay, we'll deal with that in just a minute. And then this point gets folded all the way over. So then I don't think I had enough glue on this one. So when you turn it over, you can see that you are going to have a nice little point there. You've got to accordion pleat this tip and try to bury that as much as you can under that fabric. And you can manipulate. I'll show you how to do that when we sew it on, how you can sort of manipulate that. We could cut some of that excess off, but we're not going to do it right now. And then this extra flag that's peeking over, just again, just fold it under. And even if it comes out on the other side, just fold it under. And you've got that a little accordion pleat. And then you've got a nice shape that we're going to be able to sew on. Okay, so and then with the wool applique, this you don't have to have a seam allowance at all for. So all you're going to do is on that extra little piece of wool that I recommended, the contrasting, is put your shape down on the wool. I actually took a Sharpie and just outlined it, and then when I cut it out of the wool, I stayed within that Sharpie line so that the Sharpie, you can't see it on the applique. And what you're going to want to do is cut 4 pieces of each of the tulip applique, and then again, don't forget to mark the left and the right. So the last thing we want to do with these applique pieces is stitch the piece of Oya onto the background. So take the tails, and I usually just use those to sew them in. And the first one's a little bit tricky because you've got to get it through, you know, just putting it through the corner here and all of this fabric. And then first thing you want to do is just work up the stem. So just come from behind. And just put a little inconspicuous stitch in there. Barely can see that. And then, to secure the rest of it, I'm going to run stitches. There's little horizontal stitches that run. You can kind of see them here. And you're just going to put a stitch in each one, and that'll secure it good enough. And also it'll leave the edge of the applique sort of nice and elevated, where you're not sewing that down so much so it flattens it. And just make sure it stays centered. You can put a pin in it if you want to, but I find that gets in the way. This is such a small piece and easy to hang on to. Alright, and then once you've got that last stitch in there, just run a few stitches sort of in where this bridge is. You know, you can see that little curve. Just run a stitch in there. Just one will do it. Just pop that guy in there. Maybe one in between the fans. One again here in the middle. And then once you run out of thread, just use your other tail to weave up the other side. And that's good enough to secure those in. So get all of those sewn on, and then we are going to attach these to the background. So now that all your applique pieces are turned and ready to go, we can start putting them onto our background, which is the fun part because we can see our work progress. We can really see a huge difference now coloring this in. So the best thing to do is start with these circles. These are the bright circles that we made. We made 8 of them. We'll set aside 4 for now and use these 4. And you're going to stitch them where you had those bubbles, you know, where you counted out. This is 1, and then on the 13th all the way around. So you've got one that's coming off each one. So I've done 3 of them, and I'll stitch this one on so I can show you how to applique. So one little pin is fine to hold this in place while you stitch it. And I've got a very thin poly on my needle. But you could do cotton, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just make it so it's really thin, you can't see it. Our goal is to not see these stitches. what I've done is come up from behind and right out of the edge of the applique there. So I'm just out the edge, so it is attached now. And then I can take the pin out, I'll just hold it in place with my thumb. But what you want to make sure you're doing is you're going to go into the background fabric directly across from where your thread is coming out. And incidentally, make sure you're matching your thread to your applique, not your background. Always match your thread to the place you're stitching. Into the background, and then go about a 1/16 of an inch into the back, and then come right out the edge. It's like 1, maybe 2 threads there. It's really tiny. And then just secure it in. And then so again, across, if you can, I know that's really hard to see. I'm trying to get the light to shine on it. So, you know, your biggest goal is just make sure that your thread matches where you're putting your needle into. In other words, don't go ahead of it, don't go behind it. Go directly across. Sink your needle into the fabric about a 1/16 of an inch and come right out the edge of the circle. And then just do that all the way around. Do that for all 4, and then we'll start to put on the Oya pieces. Once you get your 4 circles on, the next step is to take one of the Oya pieces for each side, and right above the dot, about a 1/4 of an inch away, go ahead and stitch your applique piece on. Just to make sure that they're lining up straight. You could run a big ruler, you know, from here all the way to the other side, just to make sure that they're all kind of laying flat. Just watch as you're stitching. If it starts to turn a little bit, go back and take the stitches out. You know, it's you can pin it, but it still distorts, so you just kind of have to watch it as you stitch it. But usually what I do is I'll just go right into that point. And again, match your thread to your applique. And same kind of thing, just right down where your thread's coming out of. And about a 1/16 of an inch right to the edge of the applique. And of course we've already sewn the Oya on, so that's already secure, so this just makes it really easy. We just stitch this on like a normal piece of applique. Alright, so all the way around, do that for all 4, and then we'll come back and do the little squiggles on the sides. Sort of to eye up the placement here. Each corner I figure will be coming from, you know, if you were to draw a straight line, it would go between these 2 bubbles, so that you have these 3 here. Kind of watching the distance between here and here and here and here, and the height of where they're sitting. So just eye it up and get as close as you can. We're going to be adding some embroidery and branches, and it's, you know, it's more interesting if it's a little bit off. You know, it doesn't have to be so perfect. It's the same thing. Start at the point. And just keep thinking 1/16 of an inch directly across from where this is coming out, down into the fabric. So when you near the point, the really sharp point, scoop all of the extra bits of fabric and seam allowance all the way, push it all the way to the inside, to the opposite side of what you're stitching. And come up to the point, put an extra little stitch in there. Then when you come along to do the other side, you've got a strong enough base right here where you can just go ahead and swoop all that extra stuff in with your needle and just push it in. If there's a lot of seam allowance, you can cut, but make sure you're cutting just where the fraying is and just where the edge is. Try not to cut anywhere near up to that corner, otherwise you're just going to be dealing with putting more of the seam allowance, more fraying there at the point, and that's hard to manage. It's a lot of fabric to try to shove under the point, but you can see what I'm doing. I'm just sort of shoving it and taking the main part of the applique and pushing it over where that seam is. Then when you hold it really tight, take a couple really little stitches. So all of that stuff gets held into place. And that's a pretty decent point, and all of the seam allowance is tucked underneath. And then the same thing, work your way back down. And once you come down here, then it's real easy to just swoop, tuck, hold it really strong with your thumb, and then applique down to the point again. Okay, so once those are done, I've done these already. Then you're going to take your other two Oya pieces and place them here and stitch them on. What I did was I had them going straight out, at a 45-degree angle with this one. And so why I did that is because it visually sort of gives a square once you get the other ones in. So stay about 1/4 of an inch away. Sort of the curve here will match the convex curve coming this way. Watch your distance here. See where these hit, it's like 1, 2 away from the point. 1, 2. And this is kind of happening here. So just watch for the negative space around the applique. Pin them, and then go ahead and stitch those in place. Okay, so that is going to do it for this week. We've got lots of embroidery to do next week. And that's when the piece really starts to come alive with all those extra little details and extra colors. So thank you again so much for joining me for Little Birdie Told Me. We will see you next week for part 5, embroidery. I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with.